Well, the United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohamed bin Zayed Al Nahyan landing in Paris for his first overseas state visit. The leader meeting with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron on Monday, with energy and transport deals at the top of their agenda. Now, a key facet of this trip likely to be the unveiling of guarantees given by the Emirates on quantities of hydrocarbon or diesel supplies to France. The UAE exports to France in 2019 reached 1.5 billion euros, much of it refined petroleum products, but the Emirates does not currently supply diesel to the country. And France is seeking to, quote, diversify its sources of supply in the context of the conflict in Ukraine. For more on this now, let's bring in Rosie Birchard. She's an I-24 News contributor live for us in Paris. Rosie, good afternoon to you. What does this mean for bin Zayed to choose France as his first presidential trip abroad? And what does it mean for his French counterpart as well?
Well, this first presidential trip abroad is now well underway. President Sheikh Mohamed bin Zayed Al Nahyan is here in Paris. The Champs-Élysées, not far from where I am, is now decked out in UAE flags and it's closed off to the public. The two presidents are set to meet in an intimate lunch setting over a working lunch where they will discuss bilateral relations. And those are bilateral relations which are in a pretty good shape going into these talks. They were really cemented in 2021 when France and the UAE agreed a major arms export deal. The UAE bought dozens of French fighter jets for a multi-billion euro deal. So certainly relations which are in good stead. But however, France looking to deepen them further, particularly when it comes to that question of energy. France, along with other European Union countries, is really desperately seeking to diversify its energy supplies to try and get rid of its dependence on Russia, that long-term dependence on Moscow, which has now been so sharply thrown into focus due to the war in Ukraine. So a new deal expected to be discussed by these two leaders when it comes to diesel supplies. And this is really reflected also in efforts elsewhere as the two presidents meet here in Paris. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is in Azerbaijan signing a fresh deal on energy there as well. So that's really topping the agenda for this bilateral meeting, which is, as I said, coming into these talks, relations in pretty good place between France and the UAE, but seeking to deepen them further.
And Rosie, what are some other joint interests and topics on the agenda? We know that fuel and energy will certainly be there, but what about in terms of geopolitics? Will Iran be on the agenda, the possibility of returning to a nuclear deal, their threat in the region? Tell us what you think.
Well, first of all, they're expected to discuss some cultural issues. Now, the UAE is home to the biggest French-speaking Francophone community in the Gulf region, and France has a military base in the UAE, so we'll certainly be discussing those kind of cultural ties. But what is not officially on their agenda, Iran nuclear deal, however, what is on their agenda is regional geopolitics, and it would be surprising that these two leaders would not at least touch on that point. However, it's going to be discussed in much greater detail a few hours away in Brussels, where European Union foreign ministers are meeting, and indeed French Foreign Minister Colonna is in Brussels for those talks. The European Union is the mediator of the JCPOA talks, and of course at the end of last month the EU was in Doha facilitating indirect exchanges between Tehran and Washington, which the EU says did not yield the progress necessary to be able to advance. So still a bit of a stalemate there. No big breakthroughs expected, certainly in these talks here in Paris, but very likely to be on their agenda. France, of course, trying to underscore its own role within the region, as I said, with its own military base in the UAE and that major fighter jet deal which was secured in 2021.
Rosie Birchard live for us in Paris. Thank you.